If you've watched any of my content, you'll know that I have a deep, passionate love for Zimbabwe, both of the country and its people. But it's not always been plain sailing for me living out here over the last 6 years. In fact, as a Brit living in Zimbabwe, there are a few things that I have just downright struggled with. And that's what today's video is going to be about. I wanted to talk to you all about the things that I've personally struggled with over the past 6 years. Now, these aren't necessarily things that are wrong with Zimbabwe as a country. More of them are just personal challenges and struggles that I myself have had, and they vary on the scale from fairly serious to fairly silly, and I hope you'll enjoy that. As such, I've grabbed my camera, I've come back out here to Hillside Dam's Conservancy, and I thought this would make a nice backdrop rather than the usual white wall of my bedroom, just to sit and have a chat with you guys. If this is the first time you're watching one of my videos, then Celebonani and ahoy! Welcome to the channel. I'm Captain Benzie, also known as the Bulawayo Buccaneer. I share my love for Zimbabwe on this channel, showcasing everything that I can, just to show you how beautiful this place is. And if this isn't your first video, then welcome back. I hope you enjoy this one just as much as you have the others. I'm not sponsored in any way, shape or form, so if you want to help support this channel, the easiest and cheapest way to do so is just to head down below, click like on the video, and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help. But I do have a Patreon page and a Redbubble merchandise store if you do want to go the extra mile to keep me making content like this. Anyway, I've got my bottle of water because it is baking hot out here, so let's just dive right in to the 5 things that I as a Brit have struggled with the most since moving to Zimbabwe. So let's come right out of the gate with the single heaviest and most controversial topic that I'm going to cover in this video. I figured that if I get this one out of the way early on, we can focus on the more fun and light-hearted stuff later on. Challenge number 1 has been my colonial past. Now, I'm British, and Britain and Zimbabwe have a complicated history, to put it lightly. Now, before I go any further, I should say that the feedback I've received on this channel has been absolutely phenomenal. I've had so much love from Zimbabweans both locally and out in the diaspora. And even here, living in Zimbabwe, the people have been the friendliest and most welcoming that I can imagine. But at the same token, there have been a few that look at me as British and see the colonial ghost of the past in my face, in my skin tone, in my accent. And I do have to deal with that and reckon with it. Now, I've spent a lot of time over the last 6 years talking with people, both black and white, about that colonial history, and it's complicated. Some people on both sides will tell you that there were good things that came out of colonialism. There are definitely bad things that came out of colonialism as well, and ultimately, I do agree that this country should have had its independence. I agree with the independence. I think that a white minority rule in a country that is predominantly black is never going to be a representative democracy. It's never going to be a representative government. And even though some of the whites here would argue that they know best and how to deal with the country, and that everything's gone downhill since independence, I don't rightly agree with that. There have been complications over that time, certainly. You don't need to be an expert in Zimbabwean history to know that there have been some difficulties over the past 30-40 years. I'm British, I'm living in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was at one point a British colony, and so I have to learn to deal with that. It's just a case of embracing that history is there, understanding it, learning from it, and growing from it. As a Brit living in Zimbabwe, it is something that I do sometimes have to answer for. And it's a difficult one, because I don't have an opinion on this. I don't feel like I should be allowed to have an opinion on this yet. I've been living in this country 6 years. I want to support the local people to the best of my ability. Every dollar I make goes straight back into the Zimbabwean economy. I'm here as a Brit living in Zimbabwe. I want to be seen as a Zimbabwean supporter, if not directly Zimbabwean. And I hope that kind of makes sense. I'm trying to put this as sensitively as I can because I don't feel that I can look at things and give an opinion. Most people are incredibly welcoming and understanding, but I do get that as a Brit living in Zimbabwe, I am a face of a difficult time from the past. So let's move on then to point number 2 in the struggles that I've faced since living in Zimbabwe. And that definitely brings us to heat. Oh boy, just look at me. I am glistening with sweat here because Zimbabwe is a lot hotter than I'm used to. It's a southern African country. I start to suffer in the UK once temperatures hit about 32 degrees Celsius. Out here, especially places like Masuna, it will regularly hit 42, 45, 48 degrees Celsius, and I am simply not built for that heat. I start to die. I start to melt. Now, fortunately, I do usually have access to things like aircon. My mother-in-law laughs a lot. The first time I ever went out to Masuna, it was right in the middle of October, right in the middle of the hottest month of the year. We were driving in a little Ford Bucky, a Bantam. I had the windows down, hoping to get some cool air, and the air that was coming across was like that out of a hairdryer, and she found this hilarious, that I'm complaining that the laws of physics just don't seem to be applying here, because breezes are supposed to be cool and refreshing, right? I'm used to sea breezes. I grew up around the White Cliffs of Dover, so I'm used to strong sea breezes. Even when it gets hot, you have a nice cool breeze to help cool you off. That's not always the case out here. There are no sea breezes, and sometimes those breezes are just as hot as the rest of the air around you. It's hot air being circulated, and that's difficult. I have had to learn to constantly carry drinks with me at all times. I am wearing shorts, something that I never used to wear in the UK. I don't like showing off my legs for the most part. It's kind of why I'm going to gym and that a bit more out here now. But yeah, I wasn't prepared for the heat. I knew it got hot out here, but I didn't know it got as hot as it did. Point number 3 then is going to be currency and finances. Now, living in the UK, obviously we just use the British pound. If I went on holiday, most of my holidays were to countries that are in the European Union, so I only had to worry about the euro, and when I'm in that country, I only had to worry directly about the euro. I could change my pounds into euros and just be done with it. It was as simple as that. Living out here, though, obviously, Zimbabwe does use the US dollar, and despite how the country is set up, I still think of the US dollar as the primary currency. It's the one that I can transfer pounds into dollars nice and easily. So for me, that's my mental baseline. But then we also have the Zimbabwe dollar, or the bond note as it's sometimes called, and we also use things like rands out here as well. And when you go to a shop, if I'm paying in US dollars cash, I may not be able to get change in US dollars cash. So sometimes my change will come back as a mix of bond, Zimbabwe dollar, or rands. And so now I'm suddenly in a day-to-day basis having to think of 3 different currencies. And that's not to mention the fact that my YouTube and my PayPal and all those other ways that I get paid, etc., start off in pounds. So I have to convert from pounds into dollars, and then from dollars into Zimbabwean dollars and rands, and it gets complex in my head. Now, my wife, bless her, is absolutely fantastic at this. She has always claimed that she's not good at math, but there she is at the till, converting dollars, Zimbabwe dollars and rands constantly, back and forth, working out change, working out how to pay for things. It's insane. For me, I just like swiping with my card. My international card works fine out here. I've got it set up so that my UK bank actually gives me far lower bank transfer fees than you might imagine. So swiping a card out here isn't really a bad thing for me. I just go straight from pounds into US dollars. I get a notification from my banking app telling me how much I've spent, but it's that constant having to figure out how much does that work out to, and that's not made easy by the fact that we are still going through a period of hyperinflation. A couple of years back, when the Zimbabwe dollar first launched, it was 1-to-1. 1 Zimbabwe dollar was 1 US dollar, and that was nice and easy. Then it hit 2 bond to $1, and now it's sitting at almost 800. But when every different shop that you go to has a different rate that it's using for the dollar, you suddenly have to work everything backwards. And as I said, I've set my brain up to think of Zimbabwe dollar as like the second step currency. US dollars is where I think of first. It's not the primary currency in Zimbabwe, that is the Zim dollar. But I work with dollars in my bank account, so when I see something in Zim dollars, I have to then try and do these complex mathematics in my head to figure out how much that is in US dollars, and then how much that'll be in pounds coming out of my bank account, and that is just complex. And I've never had to worry about this before. That's not something I've ever had to consider in the past. It's definitely a challenge. Number 4, I think I'm going to put under the singular heading of access. Now, that sounds a little bit weird, so allow me to explain. Obviously, in the UK, we have things like Amazon. If I want to buy something, it's pretty much there on my doorstep the next day. If I need a drink or something, I can just walk to the local store and I know it will be there, my favourite drink, and it'll be pretty much the same price as it always is. Things like Lucozade for me, that's one of my big favourite drinks and very difficult to get out here. It does exist, but it's very rare to come by, so I tend to buy a lot of it when it's here, and the price will vary from store to store, sometimes as little as $1.30 a bottle, sometimes as much as $3 a bottle. So access in the sense of how do I get things. Like, I'm filming this video for the first time on my new Pixel 7. My previous phone was suffering with all kinds of issues, both with overheating, with the cameras not being very good, etc. I decided it was time for me to get an upgrade. But trying to get one out here is going to be extraordinarily difficult, especially when I wanted to go for something like originally a Samsung Galaxy S22, and the price for that was sitting at around about $1,600. Now, every month I send a load of stuff to my parents in the UK, they then put it into a box, seal it all up, and they ship it to another woman in the UK who is a Zimbabwean living in the UK. She takes those boxes and ships them out to Zimbabwe, pretty much hassle-free. She deals with all the customs and stuff. I don't have to worry. I pay her. That then comes out here a couple of weeks later. We go along to her place and pick up that box. She also imports a lot of what I would call creature comforts from the UK, things like pot noodles, different chocolate bars, fizzy drinks, advent calendars now that we're getting to Christmas. Stuff that you don't really find here in Zimbabwe, but is very emblematic of Britain. So different teas and just all these different things. It's a wonderful shop, and that's how I get like my new stuff. It's a much more complex situation than it would have been in the UK. I need to now consider what I need if it's something that I can only get in the UK a month ahead of time. And otherwise, I have to start thinking about jury rigging things. Like, one of the lights that I've been using for a while now is literally a motorbike light that we attach to a 20-volt battery, and that gives me the same effect as like a $40-50 photography light would from the UK. And that's something that I found really challenging moving out here at first, because yeah, I'm gonna say, I was spoiled. I was spoiled with easy access to everything I could ever need at basically the click of a button. I don't have that here, so I've had to learn to adapt to that, to think ahead and to make plans when the basic system isn't readily available for me. On the subject of me being a spoiled brat, that also continues with access to what I would refer to as utilities. So water, electricity, internet. These are things that, again, I'm used to in the UK just kind of being there. Turn the tap and the water's on. The electricity is just there, and if you get a power cut, it's usually for a maximum of 30 minutes, and then it's right back on with an apology from the electrical supplier that they dared let you be off for that length of time. Out here, that's not the case. As you saw in my video about Masuna, when the power goes out here, it can be gone for a day or 2 or 3 or sometimes even multiple weeks. You have to learn to adapt to that. You have to have a generator readily available, or have a friend with one, or solar or things like that that you can use in case of an emergency. Water, for me, I struggle with out here. I drink bottled water because the municipal water, the guys here drink it fine, and I've known many tourists who come out here and drink the water fine. I don't know if it's something to do with me. I have had gastric problems in the past. I just seem to react badly to the water out here, so I have to drink bottled water for the most part. Even things like healthcare. In the UK, I have the NHS. If something happens to me, I just go to hospital, I get fixed, and I'm done. Here, I have to make sure that I've got a plan in place if something goes wrong. We have medical aid, kind of like a cheaper version of medical insurance, but even if you don't have that, hospital bills aren't crazy expensive out here like they are in the US. That said, they are still obviously noticeable. A couple of years back, I had my appendix out. That was an emergency, and it cost us about $4,000. That's a lot cheaper than I've seen medical bills be in the US, but it was still $4,000 that we just didn't have at that point in time, that we had to borrow from people and then pay back. Since then, yes, we now have medical aid, and we have savings put to the side in case of emergency. Healthcare out here, by the way, is actually ridiculously good. The doctors, the nurses, the staff are efficient, the hospitals are clean. I came here with this prejudiced idea, and then I experienced it, and it was every bit as good as the UK, and in fact, some ways better, because it's not had 12 years of a Tory government privatising it. It actually still runs pretty well. That brings us to point number 5 then, and sorry I've had to move the camera around a bit. The sun is now directly overhead and it was blinding me. Point number 5 then is going to be actually staying out here. This is a challenge, and not for the reasons you might think. I'm not saying it's challenging to stay out here because, oh, the country's difficult and I'm not sure I can put up with it. No, I can. I want to be here. I'm talking about the actual immigration process. Now, when I first moved out here, Carrie and I got married literally 7 days after I first landed. Now, part in part was to help with the immigration process. We knew it was something we wanted to do anyway, but the very fast rush into it was so that I could then apply for a residency permit and actually live here and have the right to work here. That in itself was a situation I've never had before. I grew up with the UK being part of the EU, which meant I had complete freedom of movement through 27 countries, the right to live, the right to work, all of that across 27 additional European countries. I obviously didn't have the right to live and work in Zimbabwe when I first got here, and I had to go through a rather extensive process, a load of interviews, going all the way out to Harare to get all of the paperwork in order for me to actually stay here. And every 2 years, I have to pay to go through that process again. That's a lot simpler after the first time. It's basically just renewal, but it is still this entire rigmarole that I'd never had to experience whilst living in the UK. And there's a lot of complexity in Zimbabwe government systems. You often have to basically hire someone just to help you through the process. It's not to say you can't do it on your own, you very much can, but it certainly helps to have someone who understands the complexities of the system and helps you avoid all those pitfalls. Nothing worse than spending $500 on a visa only to have it rejected because you forgot something really, really basic, and you just have to go through it again with another $500. Every 2 years now, as I said, I do have to renew my residency permit and my work visa. That's not too bad. We've got a guy in immigration who we speak to. He just sorts it out for us. We provide the documentation needed. That's really cool, and it works quite nicely. In fact, now that I've been here 5 years, I think I can apply for a permanent residency. And that's a process I'd like to document on this channel. It's something I'm looking forward to going through. And I think at 10 years, I can apply for citizenship and actually get a passport. I'm not 100% clear on that. And there is always that concern. What if it doesn't go through this time? What if there's something wrong this time? What if, like, the rules have changed and the laws have changed, and what if I'm rejected? That means I would have to move back to the UK, and that would be naturally very difficult. I'm married to a Zimbabwean woman. I love this country. I don't want to leave it. So I have to constantly have that in the back of my head of, I need a plan for that at any point in time as well. So I'm looking forward to the permanent residency and then hopefully one day citizenship. That'd be really cool, and it means I don't have to pay a subscription fee to live here anymore. Because $300 every 2 years is, I think, pretty good value for money, especially considering how much a monthly visa is for someone in the UK to visit Zimbabwe. I'm looking forward to just being able to live in Zimbabwe, live my life out here, have fun, enjoy my time, and share it all with the rest of the world. So, I don't know, we'll see how that goes when the time arrives. And so there we go, 5 challenges I have faced as a British man living in Zimbabwe. It's not been easy, but it has been the most enjoyable 6 years of my life, and part of that naturally is due to having a beautiful and wonderful wife who I love with my full heart. Also, just living in such a magical place as Zimbabwe. Yes, it's been hard, and having flies buzzing around my face while I'm trying to film a video makes it slightly more difficult, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I love this country, I love the people here, I love you all for watching, so thank you so much for all your support. And remember, if you have enjoyed this video, it would mean the world to me if you could just head down below, hit that like button, subscribe if you've enjoyed this and would like to see more of it, and heck, if you do want to go the extra mile to help me make this kind of content, head across to my Patreon page or my Redbubble merchandise store, and you can help support that way too. Anyway folks, thank you ever so much for watching, have a wonderful day, and see you all next time.